So there are varying levels to nifaq, right? There's a level of nifaq where a person, complete hypocrite, right? A person can be a complete hypocrite, where he or she says, I believe, but they don't believe at all. Then there are lower levels to that, where a person may believe, but then have hypocritical tendencies, right? Hypocritical tendencies. For one of the primary hypocritical tendencies is to lie, to tell lies. This is a thing that it's like the anti-Iman. It's the opposite of Iman, to lie, right? So this is the anti-Iman. It's like the diametrical opposite to Iman. So even if a person claims to be a believer, if he lies a lot, it's like he's canceling out his Iman, or him or her canceling out the Iman like this, canceling it out. It's like in mathematics, you would cancel out. It's like so you have Iman on one side, that you have lying on the other. The lying, it comes and it just cancels out the Iman. And it'll happen to the case that a person will lie, and he'll cancel out all of his Iman and become a complete munafiq, right? So lying is one hypocritical tendency. This is why the Prophet, he was asked, can a believer be a liar? Can a believer be a liar? Direct question. The Prophet said, no, a believer cannot be a liar. Believer cannot be a liar. It's one of those things, it's one of those deadly sins that you should not be involved in. Lying, right? Maybe a small white lie, and then it maybe it may get worse. Of course, we all make mistakes, but then we have to repent immediately. Sometimes we tell white lies and so on and so forth. We have to make sure it's something that we watch and we control, but we don't let it become habit forming. You shouldn't lie in the first place, but be careful with making it a habit where you just lie. Some people become compulsive liars. They just lie just for the fun of it, right? And with either Muslims or also with non-Muslims, they become compulsive liars and become something that's pathological. It's like a spiritual disease or a psychological disease within people, pathological lying. But anyway, so this is one of these attributes that it is one of the characteristics of the munafiqeen, the characteristics of nifaq, lying, right? So a person may have some belief in his heart, but then he has a tendency to lie, right? A person has to fight that tendency or fight that inclination to have the Iman basically conquer that. The Iman has to come and conquer that characteristic, right? So Iman is a purifying thing that comes to purify our hearts, and Allah will beautify the Iman in the hearts of the believers. But there are varying levels to nifaq. Umar radiallahu anhu, he would go to a man called Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, this is a companion, and he would ask him, am I on the list of the munafiqeen? Umar would say, am I on the list of the munafiqeen the Prophet gave you? The Prophet gave him a list of munafiqeen, right? And then Hudayfa would say, I can't answer you, leave me alone. Then Umar would say, are you sure? Tell me. Tell me. And Hudayfa finally told him, you are not on the list of munafiqeen, right? But I'm not going to, anybody who comes to me else, I'm not going to tell them anything. So what was Umar talking about here? Umar was talking about the sort of nifaq it's khafi. It's a sort of nifaq that is, it's not apparent. So it's like it's hidden, right? It's a sort of nifaq that it's in the heart, but it may be difficult to detect. This is the sort of nifaq that Umar is talking about. Suffice it to say that every single believer should recognize that nifaq is a possibility for him, and he has to work against it. And he has to fear being a munafiq and fear the characteristics of nifaq. Every believer has to do that. And so one of the reasons why Allah is dedicating so much time to speaking about the hypocrites in this surah, and we're still talking about it right now. So Allah says, Allahu yastahzi'u bihim wa yamudduhum fi tughyanihim ya'mahun. And that he extends the tughyan is when So it starts to cause much damage, problems, right? So this is till the end. So the human being becomes like a body of water. Right, so the human becomes dangerous like this body of water. So of course there's a metaphor here within this. وَيَمُدُّهُمْ Allah وَيَمُدُّهُمْ فِي طُغْيَانِهِمْ يَعْمَهُونَ. Allah extends them in this tughyan. He gives them medad. Medad, it's like a spiritual thing, right? So they're increased in like a spiritual darkness. The words are very particular here. It's a spiritual darkness that these people are increased in, to the extent that they won't even recognize right even if they saw it, right? Or they would not take the right course even if they knew it to be the right course. They would see the right course, and Allah talks about this in the Quran. This is directly from the Quran. They would see the right way, and they don't want it. It's like you give a person fresh water to drink. He says, "I don't." They say, "Don't." I don't. They don't want it. They'd rather drink dirty water or drink, maybe sugary drinks. Like the what are the monster drinks? Instead of having, instead of drinking like water, we go drink a monster drink that has like, maybe 100 grams of sugar in it or something like this, right? So a person becomes accustomed to drinking that sort of rubbish, and then he said, when you see pure water, you say, I don't want that, because they've become accustomed now to the corruption, accustomed to the manufactured drinks, the monster drinks, all the sugar, all the things that we know are bad for us. So a person becomes accustomed to that, and Allah gives them an increase in that, and they become accustomed to it, and also they have a what's the word? They have it becomes something that's normal for them. They become habituated to it, right? So they become habituated to the darkness, right? And Allah gives them also a spiritual medad. It's a dark thing, right? This is why some people, when they get involved in this darkness, it reaches a point where they can't recognize, they don't even want the light anymore, or they don't even recognize that certain things are off bounds. And we can look at the people that we see in politics today. Sometimes you have to wonder and ask yourself the question: do you not have any level of decency? But this is why they don't, because they have a medad that is dark. They have it's like a spiritual force that keeps them buoyed, but it's very, very dark, right? It's a medad, it's a spiritual force that they're given, but it's very, very dark. And Allah is basically giving that person enough rope to hang themselves, right? Because here's the thing: if a person does something bad, or says something bad, or does something bad on, let's say, national television, and then they say, wow, that was wrong, I need to apologize, I need to issue an apology or apologize to this family, right? That's a good sign. It's a sign that there's some life in the heart. But there's a sign that there's some guilt there. There's some life to the soul, right? But when a person does something bad and then tries to justify it and doesn't see that there's anything wrong that they did whatsoever, then you know that something else is going on. يَمُدُّهُمْ فِي طُغْيَانِهِمْ. Giving like this, they have again, the spiritual sort of medad, but it's dark. So sometimes we have to wonder, where does some of these people get this energy from, this vigor, right? Like the entire world will be telling a particular person, this is wrong, this is wrong. That person will tell themselves, no, this is right. This is the perfect course to do. Like, half the world is telling the person, no, let's say more than half, the entire world is telling the person, everybody knows this is wrong. This goes against all Islamic decency, Christian decency, Jewish, any moral standard that you have, it goes against that. It goes against it. Any moral standards that we have goes against it. But the person within in himself, he says, no, this is right. This is the right course to take, right? And then you have other people who follow him. Oh, that's the right course. Why? Because they're like him and they appreciate him. Because their hearts are in a similar state. Right? Their hearts are in a similar state. And of course, only Allah can rectify the hearts. Right? So we ask Allah for that rectification. This is why the Islam was sent, to rectify our situations, to purify our hearts. Right? So why we read Surah al-Baqarah and study Surah al-Baqarah. It's the antidote to those things. It's the light that wards off and pushes out that darkness. But the human being has to want it. The human being has to be dedicated to the light, dedicated to doing righteous things, doing good things, and turning away from dark things, turning away from backbiting, turning away from lying, slander, cheating, and so on and so forth. The human being has to dedicate himself to the light, and recognize that cheating, lying, slander, and all these things are dark and they're wrong, and they hurt the human soul, and they hurt the world at large, the cosmos at large. It hurts everything, right? So these munafiqeen, worst sort of people, worst sort of harm in the world is the munafiq. I'm going to make that very, very clear. The worst sort of harm in the world is the person who shows two faces, the munafiq, the hypocrite, right? So we'll finish the page, inshallah, then we'll have a brief reading from beginning of guidance. So Allah, He continues in the next verse. أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ اشْتَرَوْا الضَّلَالَةَ بِالْهُدَىٰ. So these people now, they have bought misguidance, and they bought up misguidance and they sold guidance. So they bought up the misguidance, and they have what they barter it with. So they gave up the guidance, and so they had guidance, or Allah, they had a guidance, they had a purity, and they gave that up, turned away from it, or sold it altogether and bought up misguidance, right? أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ اشْتَرَوْا الضَّلَالَةَ بِالْهُدَىٰ. They bought misguidance and sold the guidance. فَمَا رَبِحَتْ تِجَارَتُهُمْ. So the reality is that their tijara, it's like their trade, it didn't bear any fruit. It wasn't a successful trade. وَمَا كَانُوا مُهْتَدِينَ. Right? And they were not people who were upon guidance ever. وَمَا كَانُوا مُهْتَدِينَ. So inshallah, we'll stop here and resume next week with the 4th page of Surah al-Baqarah, inshallah. We'll read briefly from the beginning of guidance.